retrograde of the year is here, and it is in Leo. Beginning on July 17th, 2025, we will begin to journey backwards in the sign of Leo to hopefully gain some more perspective and necessary clarity in this sector of our charts.
Create like a child and just edit like a scientist. Like that right there, I think has solved so many things from when I make songs, it'll be freaking so many versions because I'll put all the ideas out, just all of them. I'm not trying to be good or great or bad. I'm just putting it there. And over months, over a year or 2 years, I edit that song to make it the best version.
I think that a really great word that marries both Mercury and Leo together is the word genius. The word genius combines both this mercurial by nature intellectual ability along with this Leo or solar in nature creativity or natural inclination. Whenever we talk about Leo or the sun, we usually find ourselves back in childhood because this is something that is born and innate in all of us. And this is also why genius, or the word genius, it can talk about the spirit or character of someone. So this is their voice, this is their spirit that's coming through in whatever work it is that they're putting out, or even in their everyday lives and conversations. This Mercury retrograde may be a time where we are going back to reconnect with our genius, often found in childhood. And this is also why I really love the concept of child prodigy, because it's this idea that children are either supported or provoked into some kind of a genius or some kind of creative expression. And of course, not everyone is a child prodigy, but this is where we often find our gifts or our talents, the things that we enjoy the most, because this is way before they're buried under responsibility or performance. Performance is very Leo solar in nature as well. Mercury retrograde may show us that it is time to drop a performance somewhere and reconnect with a more authentic genius side of ourselves. One thing I also notice about Leo transits and placements is that because it's opposite Aquarius, a Saturnian sign, this may bring up a lot of shame, blame, guilt, as well as things that trap this sign away from its fullest expression. It can be a time where we have to be the bigger person, or we may choose not to be the bigger person, which invokes that Leo drama and flair. But it can also be about choosing the gentler but stronger thing to do. These are themes that can also show up this retrograde for you if genius isn't something that's resonating. Leo can also talk about the trial and error of the creative process. That includes like improv and the public success and the public failures that we may have. It can also be about creativity that must be expressed and can't be contained. So this is something that we are all going to be connecting with over this 3-week period. Leo is a fixed sign, and like the other fixed signs, Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, it's about sustaining something. But in Leo's case, it can highlight the unsustainability of performance versus the courage that is required to be authentic. So this is simple enough, it sounds simple to be authentic, but because of our survival instinct, because of the ego, and that's very solar in nature, it is really difficult sometimes to reconnect to that. Instead of leaning into the systems that we already have set up. All of the fixed signs rule these tangible resources like money, clothing, food, anything that can be used as a resource, and it mimics this natural trial and error of creativity in pursuit of survival. Mercury in Leo is also about experimenting with your creativity, even if it's not being received well or if it's not very popular at the time. And this is mimicked in shows and media and generally the culture around fame and success. Something that just came out was The Bear. It just released I think 4th season, and this is a show that quite literally is one of the best examples I've seen of the creative process and all of the failure that can come in that creative process, as well as the ego and the temper and all of the other issues around collaboration. I think it's a really great Mercury and Leo watch. Same with Daisy Jones and the Six. That's a really good one. I also like to think about some of the more major stars that have come out over the last couple of years, like Chappell Roan, Charlie XCX, Sabrina Carpenter. None of these artists are new. These are people who have hit it big during the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. But This was after years of flops and failures and several albums even put out that were not necessarily received well by the public before they became who they are now. Somebody I also love to reference in relation to Leo themes or the creative process is Tyler the Creator. He is a Leo rising, and he is constantly advocating for his creativity, for not being afraid to look weird or to not be received well. One of my favorite quotes that just came out recently, I think it was an interview that was released like a month ago or so, was creating like a child and editing like a scientist. These are all real survival issues that both support and destroy the creative process. Fewer resources could mean more creative juice, but it also activates your mind and the fear that shows up, the anxiety that shows up when you don't have the resources to actually produce the things that you enjoy and to keep diving into your craft. I wouldn't be surprised too if Mars retrograde in Leo came back around, whatever events that you were experiencing during Mars retrograde in Leo came back around this Mercury retrograde. Dates broadly, Mars was in Leo November 3rd through January 6th, and it was actually retrograde December to January, and it came back around in April of this year and stayed until June 17th. It technically passed its station degree around May 3rd. But this is generally like reworking the Leo sector of our charts, and this is something that's been happening over the last few years between Mars retrograde and also Venus retrograde that we saw back in 2023, and we've had Mercury retrogrades in Leo since then as well. And every year this has been built upon, embellished upon in the sector of our charts, and it's likely to hit on some sort of repeating core motif. And it's not been without a struggle. This is why it's really important to look at the house that Leo sits for you personally, to understand the building blocks that you've been working with and the struggles that you've been having over the last couple of years. All of these survival themes especially were likely more irritating with Mars retrograde than Mercury retrograde is. Mercury retrograde is more about reprocessing and bringing back some of those events so that we can kind of look at them differently, so that maybe we can understand that some of that survival instinct is more mental than it is actual. This is actually why I'm a really big, very public lover of Mercury retrogrades, and that's really just because I think that they help us contextualize some of the struggles or the issues that we've been having. They help us to change our perspective, and when you change your perspective, you can make different choices. You can see different doors opening, and I think that overall Mercury retrograde, when it's all said and done, is actually quite helpful. Uranus also just entered Gemini as of July 7th, 2025. And I think that this is a really big deal for Mercury retrograde. And the reason is because Mercury rules over Gemini. So Mercury retrograde ruling this Uranus and Gemini transit so early on, and in a preview no less, because of course Uranus will still retrograde back into Taurus before it fully settles into Gemini for the next 7 years. So Mercury retrograde is helping us to kind of access these planetary themes and personalize it, which is really important because unless you have personal planets in your own chart that's being aspected by Uranus, you may not always have access to this planet's wisdom and its revolution. And really that's kind of what's happening. These perspective shifts over Mercury retrograde could potentially start somewhat of a revolution in your life as they disrupt these older patterns of behavior. And there's so much more, of course, that Uranus is doing over the next 7 years, but this preview is really important, and it can show us what exactly we are dismantling over these next 7 years. Part of the reason why the station direct moment for Mercury is a little bit rockier than the start of the retrograde is because we have this full moon in Aquarius on August 9th, just before Mercury stations direct, and I think it's going to be a little bit of a tense one, and it's similar actually to the one that we had in August of 2024 last year. It was a really intense, like, mutable T-square that was going on in the sky at the time, and I remember that time to be pretty intense for a lot of people. This year, instead of a mutable T-square, we get a cardinal T-square. So these are working very different areas of our lives and our charts. While 2024's full moon dealt more with mental concerns, risks taken, paperwork nightmares, health crises, things like that. Issues with honesty, the unknown. 2025's full moon in Aquarius kind of deals more with this cardinal theme of initiation, creating or destroying something, alliances, matters of the home base, or even the ambitions that kind of take us away from our home base. So Mars will enter Libra on August 6th, a few days before the full moon, and then it will enter into an opposition with Saturn at 1 degrees Aries on the full moon. So soon after, they will begin to start to square Venus and Jupiter, who will conjoin in Cancer. Mars-Saturn oppositions notoriously suck, but they're not the end of the world. They're just usually kind of intense times. This is part of what makes that station direct pretty rocky as well, combined with this full moon. The last Mars-Saturn opposition that we had was back in July of 2023. This is usually a time of desires meeting delays, hard obstacles appearing sometimes out of nowhere, consequences of our hasty actions. It can also be some kind of like serious like inflammation showing up. Actually, back in 2023, since Mars and Saturn were on the Pisces and Virgo axis, I had my gallbladder taken out at that time, and it was kind of mirroring this emotional situation in my life at the same time, which I think is really reminiscent of Pisces, this emotional world, versus Virgo, the health or the physical body. And so this year, with Mars and Saturn in Libra and Aries, this is more likely to be conflict or obstacles that are showing up in our relationships, our alliances. But something that I really love, actually, that is coming in to help us, and this is not something that we had access to back in 2023, was both mutual reception. And by that I mean Mars is going to be in Libra and Saturn is in Aries, and so they are sort of swapping rulers. Saturn exalts in Libra and Mars is the ruler of Aries, so they're giving each other support from their own territories. And additionally, we also are getting support from the benefic conjunction that's happening in August. It's looking like Jupiter and Venus are benefics in astrology. They are the do-gooders in astrology, the ones that kind of help us or support us. They give us aid. And especially in Cancer, they can give us aid from the home front. So I am kind of thinking with this T-square, it's looking like a literal or metaphorical war is instigated in our lives through some sort of conflict in our relationships, potentially. Could also deal with issues of independence or not being able to move freely. And I imagine that support is likely to arrive only as a result of this conflict because of this benefic conjunction that we're having in Cancer. Support is likely going to be found from the home base, wherever that hits in your own chart. Now, all of this relates back to Leo. We've already established that this creative process naturally entails conflicts, failures, obstacles. They're a natural part of success. And so you may find some sort of natural redirection that is for the best in the end through this Mars-Saturn opposition. And also, Leo and Aries share quite a bit of similarity as well. The sun exalts naturally in Leo, and so they're both related to our core identities and our selfhood. Saturn and Aries may introduce conflict where we may suppress our true nature, and where limitation whittles away at what we really want, our actual goals or dreams. So Mercury retrograde is really helping us strengthen our sense of self. The last thing that I feel is important about this Mercury retrograde is the opposition to Pluto. Now, technically, Mercury will be several degrees away from the exact opposition to Pluto, but we're still experiencing the oppositions from the Sun and Venus eventually when it enters Leo. And these oppositions are not new. They took place 3 times during the Mars retrograde, and it was very present during summer of 2024 as well, but the effects are much easier to recognize in hindsight. So I urge you to look back on these Pluto oppositions last summer of 2024 and during Mars retrograde. Even though Mercury is already past the opposition to Pluto, all Leo transits from now to 2043 will have this sort of Plutonian quality to them. Mercury-Pluto deals with an inward but often violent perspective shift, so you may notice insane growth in hindsight, especially in your self-development, thinking about Leo and its connection to the self, but it may feel like initially really uncomfortable, and it's riddled with insecurity, power issues. Pluto is the deep tissue work that occurs over decades by addressing power issues and insecurities. If you have placements from 0 to 5 degrees of fixed signs, Leo, Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, you'll be the most impacted and will probably feel the identity crisis. I know I have as a Taurus sun. Ultimately, all of this pushes us towards brilliance and closer to ourselves. So I think it's something to embrace, the uncomfortable feelings, all of it. Hopefully, all of this has brought you some greater clarity around Mercury retrograde and what you could be seeing over the next couple of weeks. May your genius shine through. I'll catch you on the other side.
How that affected the whole thing. So because of that, I went back and was like, I need to reteach myself how to write songs. I need to relearn how to write songs. I need to actually sit. What is a hook? What is a chorus? What is structure? What's an outro? What is this, and that? And because of that, I went back and studied records that I thought I knew like the back of my hand, songs that have been with me since I can remember remembering, and listen to it in a different way.